Hi, I'm Harry Dewulf and I help people with stories. The fable is my natural medium. But for most of my youth, I was contemptuous of fables for their simplistic moralising. But I was young and simple-minded, and I accepted, as many do, that not only were all fables written by Aesop, but also that the main purpose of fables is to teach simple moral lessons to children. Anyone who thinks that has not reread them as an adult. Some of the fables are obviously Greek from the characters and the situations, like the Hare and the Tortoise. Others are more obviously medieval and northern European, like the story of the dog in the manger. There are cultural differences in the topics of the fables too. The classical fables tend to be about personality and character, whereas the medieval ones are more likely to be about power and the control of resources. If you read fables as an adult, either the vast collection known as Aesopica or the poems of De La Fontaine and his followers, if you read them as an adult, you might begin to notice that all is not as clear and simplistic as you thought. If you are a writer of any kind, the complexity of these fables is an object lesson in symbolism that can teach you how to use figurative and indirect communication in your work. And if you're not a writer, understanding how meaning and symbols are layered will still give you a much deeper understanding not only of the meaning of and of the purpose of most fables, but of the way that symbols affect our ideas and understanding in everyday life. In its simplest form, the fable of the dog in the manger does not give the dog's reasons for being there, nor does it have anything to say about his general character, although many versions add such details. The fable is as follows. I'm trying to create a short version, but I always have to add a little bit of detail to make it feel more like a story. On a hot day, the dog, seeking rest, went into the cool cowshed and lay down to sleep in the soft hay in the manger. When the cows came home, they woke the dog with their nuzzling at the hay that they wanted to eat. The dog, upon waking, refused to leave the manger, but bared his teeth at the cows, snarling and snapping at them, and they could not eat. The simplistic moral lesson often cited, with various versions of this, it's about envy. The dog, unable to eat the hay, nonetheless sees its value to others and withholds it from them, even though it is of no use to him. Sometimes it's about power. The dog controls the hay and therefore the cows. Sometimes it's about the pleasure that some people take in causing misery to others. The dog cannot eat the hay and so decides to make the cows go hungry in order to feel better. These interpretations more or less overlap, and they all seem quite reasonable. But let's read a little deeper. It's generally understood that in fables the animals represent people, and the animals that are chosen in order to represent types of people, either personality types or social class, strength and weakness, and so on. This is the basic lesson of symbolism. Why choose a dog? What type of person does a dog represent? In this story, this one animal needs to be able to hold the other animals in its power, and in reality, dogs routinely use intimidation in their social interactions. So a dog is chosen to represent those people who like to intimidate. What else do we know about dogs in this situation, however? Well, there is a dominant proverb in our culture, the proverb, "Let sleeping dogs lie," meaning, as I'm sure you know, that if a dog is woken too abruptly, it may feel threatened and therefore bite you, and that this itself has a symbolic lesson about how some things are best left alone. Ask yourself then, is that behaviour of being suddenly woken and bad-tempered. Is that a behaviour also found in people? Well, this is how animal symbolism works. So far, so straightforward. But there is already some complexity creeping in, because if you should let sleeping dogs lie, then maybe the dog's behaviour is explained by its being annoyed at being woken. Maybe that's why it's angry with the cows and snaps at them. Maybe the cows just misunderstand. So what about the cows? In the popular imagination, cows are herd animals, docile and considered a resource or an asset by the farmer, while the dog is considered more of a colleague or an employee by the farmer. There is an immediate status difference between the cows and the dogs. But cows are also very large and very strong compared with a dog. In fact, if you've ever worked with cows, you'll know that they're not really docile at all. Getting along with cows is a matter of either ignoring them, in which case they ignore you, or dominating them, in which case you can drive them. Do anything else, and a herd of cows can become quite dangerous. So, what is this symbolising? You remember I said that some fables were obviously medieval? That dog-cow relationship is a perfect representation of the relationship of a feudal overlord with his serfs. The serfs are numerous and strong. To control them, he has to dominate them. One of the farms in the village where I live has a huge, powerful and frightening white bull. The bull is massive and muscular, but he's visibly terrified by the farmer. Dominance isn't about physical power, but psychological power. Who knows what goes on in the mind of a bull, but a medieval serf wouldn't raise a hand to his feudal overlord for fear of the consequences. So far, so good. The animals represent types of people in society, and in our modern society, feudal relationships, it might surprise you to learn, feudal relationships continue to be common even in the most progressive democracies. Is it a surprise? Or do you already know where? It's in the workplace. Most companies above about 50 employees begin to develop a feudal mentality whether they want to or not. Shall I spell it out? The dog is your boss. Can you imagine what would happen if there were unions for cows? Now here's the big sticking point in the story. In most versions, the cows express their annoyance for the dog vocally. They say that the dog is preventing them from eating the hay, but the hay is of no use to the dog since the dog cannot eat it. Two things are wrong with this picture. The first is obvious. The dog does have a use for the hay. It makes a comfy bed. But the other is this. What does the hay represent? What is it a symbol for? Are we being asked to believe that there is a type of person who will deprive others of a resource that he cannot himself make use of? My answer to that? Name three. Seriously, name 3 resources that a person can control but cannot use, which other people could use but cannot control. Do any such resources exist? After all, it's true that if the dog is a dog, dogs can't eat hay. But if the dog represents a type of person, people can't eat hay. If the cow is a cow, cows can eat hay. But if the cow represents a type of person, people can't eat hay. So is the food representing food, or is it representing something else? If they're both people, well, surely it can't be, because how many types of food are there that one personality type can eat that another personality type can't? Why did the author of the fable choose food as a symbol for the resources? And why do so many versions of this fable point to the idea of depriving others of something you can't use? Well, if you know your Bible, you will remember the story of manna from heaven. The manna from heaven that fed the Israelites in the desert. We are told that there was no point in one person stockpiling the manna because it would rapidly become inedible. So you could eat your fill, but it was impossible to hoard. And here's the lesson so typical in medieval stories, a major preoccupation of feudal societies. Those with the power could, if they wanted to, control far more food than they could ever eat. Indeed, they often controlled more food than they could store or sell. This was especially true of the medieval church, which took 1/10 of everyone's production. Do you want a modern parallel for that? Look no further than banking. People use banks to stockpile huge sums of money. The money is a proxy for the control of resources, and in 21st century capitalism it is common for people to hoard more money than they could ever use. The complexity here is that the food isn't representing any specific resource, but instead representing and allowing us to present a behaviour with regard to resources in general. This shows that fables use simple symbols to evoke some quite complex human behaviours and ideas. The real value of fables, therefore, is not their capacity to teach moralistic lessons. If anything, the moral lessons are a smokescreen. The real value of fables is the thought and the debate that they can provoke as soon as you begin to scratch beneath the surface.